A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. Reminiscences, number 50. In the spring of 1866, the loyal men had mostly returned to their homes, among them Benjamin Alsop, who had been taken prisoner by the rebels in 1861 and confined in the penitentiary at Little Rock, Arkansas. He was released in 1865 when peace was made. There was but one house left in West Plains, an old schoolhouse about 1/4 of a mile east of the town spring, which was used for a courthouse. Judge Van Warmer, who resided at Rolla, was judge of the circuit court, and Mr. Perry was circuit attorney. A short time after the return of Mr. Alsop, a public meeting of the loyal men was called, signed by several loyal men. At the date set, the writer was present. The meeting was called to order, and Mr. Alsop was elected chairman. He stated the object of the meeting, and among other things said, "The rebels have hung, murdered, imprisoned, and driven all the Union men from their homes, and by the living they didn't intend that a single rebel should live inside the limits of Howell County." He was in favor of giving them 10 days' notice to leave the county, and if they were not gone by that time, to shoot them down wherever found. Someone introduced a resolution that the rebels be notified to leave with their families inside of 10 days, or they would force them to leave. The resolution was seconded. I got the floor and spoke as follows. If that course is pursued, it will ruin the county. Peace has been made, and General Grant has ordered the rebels to return home and become good citizens. Admitting that everything Mr. Alsop has said is true, and we were to turn around and do the same that they did, we would be just as guilty as they were, and it would be a question of might and not of right. And I want to say here now, if any man injures a late rebel, except in self-defense or in defense of his family or property, I will prosecute him to the bitter end of the law. Mr. Alsop called another man to the chair and replied to what I had said, saying, "By the living, I am surprised at Captain Monks, a man who has been treated by the rebels as he has, who now gets up here and says he will defend the rebels. By the living, I want Captain Monks to understand right here now that if any loyal man kills a rebel and has to leave the country and has no horse to ride, I will furnish him a good horse to ride off on, and by the living, let him prosecute me. He will have a sweet time of it." The next man that took the floor was a Mr. Hall, who resided about 8 miles south of West Plains. He said, "I'm just like Uncle Ben. If any loyal man kills a rebel and has to leave the country, I will furnish him a good horse to ride off on, and let Captain Monks prosecute me if he wants to. I don't think it would be healthy for him to prosecute me for killing a rebel, or helping a man who did kill one." The resolution was put to a vote and lost by a good majority. Later in the spring, there was a man by the name of Finley living 7 or 8 miles south of West Plains. The family was composed of husband and wife, both of them about 65 years of age, a daughter of 22 years, and a son of about 11. They had been rebels, but were very quiet and peaceable citizens. They were residing on government land, had good improvements, and a good orchard. There was a man by the name of Frederick Baker who had homesteaded the land Mr. Finley was living on. Baker notified Finley to leave in 10 days. If not out in that time, they would be killed. Mr. Finley wanted pay for his improvements before giving possession. At the expiration of 10 days, very early in the morning, Mrs. Finley went into the lot to milk the cows. Baker slipped up to the lot and with a Colt's revolver, shot the old lady dead. The daughter saw her mother fall, ran to her, and he shot her. She fell by the side of her mother. The old man ran to the door, reached up to get his gun out of the rack, when Baker placed his pistol against his body and shot him dead. The pistol was so close to Finley when discharged that the powder set his clothes on fire. The boy was the only one of the family left. He ran to the nearest neighbor for help, and when they got back to the house, they found the old man and his wife dead and the daughter shot through the breast, maimed for life. The old man's clothes were still on fire when the neighbors arrived. Hall made his words good, for he furnished Baker with a first-class horse, saddle, and bridle to leave the country on, and aided Baker in making his escape. As soon as the writer learned of the murder, he caused an affidavit to be made and procured a warrant for the arrest of Baker, and had it put into the hands of the sheriff, and did all in his power to cause Baker's arrest. But by the aid given him by Hall and others, he made his escape. The writer reported the murder to the governor, and the governor offered a reward of $300 for Baker's body, dead or alive. Baker never was arrested. The writer was appointed assistant prosecuting attorney by Mr. Perry, who was circuit attorney at that time. After I qualified, I caused an affidavit to be made against Mr. Hall, charging him with being an accessory to the murder before the fact, and caused his arrest. I was at once notified that if I attempted to prosecute Hall, I would meet the same fate as the Finley family. Hall was arrested, and the day set for his preliminary trial at the schoolhouse east of town. On the day set for trial, there were quite a number of persons present. The writer appeared, armed with a good pistol, laid it by his side during the progress of the trial. It was proven by the state that he, Hall, was guilty as charged. The justice hailed him over to await the action of the grand jury and ordered him to enter into a recognizance of $2,000 for his appearance at the next term of the Howell County Circuit Court, which he readily filled and was released. Soon after his release, he took the fever and died. Baker never was captured. It was one among the dirtiest murders that ever was committed in Howell County. General McBride, before the war, resided in Texas County on a farm, and was circuit judge of the 18th Judicial Circuit, which included Howell County. He enlisted in the Confederate Army and was placed in command of the Confederate troops at West Plains. The Union men well remember his famous order, given in the spring of 1861, that all Union men join the Confederate service, and if they didn't join the Confederate Army, he would hang them as high as Haman. After his term of service expired, he moved his family to near Batesville, Arkansas, where he resided up to near the close of the war. He was taken sick and died in the spring of 1866. Some of the friends of the widow in Texas County sent after her and her family to bring them back to her farm. Reaching West Plains on their return, they were out of money and provisions. They asked the people to help them, and a donation was taken up for her in West Plains. I donated $5 to help her back to her home in Texas County. After the loyal men had returned to their homes and the civil law had been fully restored, I brought suits by attachment against the following persons, to wit, William Nix, N. Barnett, for aiding the parties in arresting and taking me from my home and abusing me while a prisoner. I attached their real estate, which was well improved and valuable, procured a judgment of $8,000 against said real estate, procured an execution and ordered the sale of said real estate. Before the time for the sale, Barnett and William Nix came to me and admitted that Barnett was first lieutenant and Nix second lieutenant of Captain Forshey's Confederate company, while I was held prisoner by said company, and that I was shamefully and cruelly treated while a prisoner, but they were sorry for what they had done and hoped I would forgive them. Nix further said to me that he had saved my life, that while I was a prisoner, He overheard some of the Confederate soldiers agree that on the next night, while I was asleep, they would slip up and shoot me in the head, and he got his blankets and came and slept with me. I knew that Nix brought his blanket and slept with me one night, but did not know why he did it. Nix and Barnett further said, "Captain, you have us completely at your mercy. We believe you are a good man, and we were friends before the war. You have a judgment against our homes, and if you sell them, you will turn us and our families out of doors and leave us destitute without any homes for our wives and children." I said, "I know it is hard, for my wife and children were driven from their homes because they were loyal to the government. But children shouldn't be held responsible for the acts of their parents. And I will say to you now that I won't sell your homes. I will give them to your wives and children, who are commanded in the best book of all books to do good for evil. You men can each one pay me a small sum for expenses, and I will satisfy a judgment." Barnett paid me $150. Nix made a deed to some tax lands that I entered satisfaction on the judgments. They both said to me that they ever would be grateful for what I had done for them. The country began to settle up, and the people, irrespective of past associations, formed new ones, especially the sons and daughters of those who wore the blue and the gray, and seemed to forget that they had ever been enemies. As time sped on, these attachments ripened into love. I had but 2 daughters living. Nancy E. Monks, the oldest, married V.P. Renfro, the son of a Confederate. They have 2 children, a son Charles and a daughter Mattie M., now grown. Mary M. Monks, who married H.D. Green, whose father, a Confederate colonel, died in the service. They have 5 children living, and 1 dead, 1 girl and 4 boys. Their children are Mattie E., now Mattie E. Bugg, Will H.D., Frank, Russell, and Dick. Adeline Turner, whom I had raised, married Jacob Schaffler, a Union soldier, and has 10 children, 4 boys and 6 girls. Abraham Roach, a boy who had made his home with me since infancy, married Mattie Hunt, a daughter of Jesse Hunt, a Union soldier, has 3 children living, 2 girls and 1 boy, Maggie, Frank, and Bernice. I don't believe that there is any person that loves their children better than I do, and I don't see any difference between my grandchildren and my own children. I love my sons-in-law as well as my own children. I love the girl and boy that I raised, and their families feel as near to me as my own. They are flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone, and our highest duty to God and them is to teach them patriotism and loyalty to their government, and that their first duty is to God, and their second duty to their country.